You've really got to stop doing this, decorating with orange pumpkins and squash for the autumn season. Pumpkins and squashes are a great emblem of autumn, but do they really need to be orange? I say orange pumpkin and you say Halloween. I'm on a one-woman campaign to eradicate orange pumpkins from my autumn decor. So if you fancy switching things up, how about disguising the orange of your pumpkins and doing something a little bit different this year? I bought these plastic pumpkins a few years ago. They were really great when my family were younger, but now they just scream Halloween, which is only one day of the year, and I really want to celebrate the whole of the autumn season. In this video, I'm going to get rid of this orange by making a jumper to cover my pumpkin. I've got two methods for you. One's a no-sew option and one involves a hot glue gun. So watch right through to the end and I'll show you what you need to do to update your pumpkin look. So if you're ready to say goodbye to orange, let's get started with the video. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie from Julie Davis Flower Workshops and Flower Start, the online flower arranging classes. I do a mix of crafting and flower arranging videos here on my channel. For this project, I'm using an old jumper. You may have one at home. I actually bought this from the charity shop, and I've got my dressmaking scissors so they're nice and sharp to cut through the wool fabric. I'm going to use the sleeves of the jumper to make a cover to go over my pumpkins. Before I get my scissors out, I'm going to slide the pumpkin up through the arm of the jumper just so I can be certain how much of the wool fabric that I need to cut. So this was quite a tall pumpkin, as you can see, so I'm probably going to cut off the full arm length. And when you're happy with the fit of your jumper, take your sharp scissors and begin to cut across. So just making sure you're cutting evenly and you don't have one side longer than the other. For this tall pumpkin, I'm going to show you the no-sew option for getting a really tight fit for your jumper sleeve. And I'm going to use my hot glue gun. As you can see, I glued about 2 or 3 centimetres on the base of the pumpkin and then just hold the jumper in place until it dries and then work your way around the base, just doing a small section at a time and making sure the jumper is stretched evenly throughout, so you haven't got a sort of tight side and a baggy side. So just keep an eye on the overall tension, and if you've got any extra fabric you can always cut that off at the end. Just need to remember when you're using your hot glue gun not to burn your fingers, so if you find it easier you might want to smooth down the edge of the jumper with a palette knife or your back of your pair of scissors so you're not actually using your fingertips, and it only takes a few moments to go all the way around the edge and you end up with a really crisp finish. I'm going to gather in the wrist section of my jumper to create a decorative detail around the neck of my pumpkin, and I'm using a wire edged ribbon here in the black gingham and just tying it round in a regular shoelace bow, just pulling up the cuff a little bit so it doesn't sink down. You want this bit to be quite tall because this is going to become the stalk section of your jumper pumpkin. And then, as I say, tie yourself a bow and just even out the loops. And you might want to do a little pulling of the loops and then shortening the tails, pulling the loops, shortening the tails, just so you've got a really pretty looking and even sided bow. And when you're happy with how your bow looks, then take your scissors and create a little dovetail finish. This will stop your ribbon from fraying, but also gives a really polished finish to your ribbon. So what I do here is fold the ribbon in half, matching the two wire edges together, and then I cut from the folded end out and up towards the edge of the ribbon. And what you've created here is a beautiful neutral toned pumpkin which really fits into the very fashionable farmhouse decor style, and you've totally got rid of that very vibrant orange that just screams Halloween rather than the season of autumn. You could leave your pumpkin like that with a simple bow, or perhaps add in some greenery. So what I've got here are some offcuts of a eucalyptus garland, so I'm cutting them to length and then I'll glue gun those into position. I started off adding in my first bit of greenery to the left hand side, and then I mirror that by taking in another piece of green off to the right, and then I'll add some more green through the centre of the bow and just carry on with as much or as little as the green as you like, you decide. I'm using my floristry scissors to cut through the garland. There's a little wire running through, and you may find if you're using kitchen scissors they're not strong enough, so either the floristry scissors with a special groove for wire cutting or a pair of wire cutters will help you here. So you can see there from the top it looks beautiful and simple, just with a ribbon and the greenery in, but of course you may decide to add in other decorative details, and here I've got some dried wheat as well, which really does fit in with the harvest, with the autumn theme. So I'm cutting these sections down to size. I end up putting 3 off to one side and balancing that and mirroring that by having 3 on the other side as well. And when you're happy with the placement of your wheat, you can move on to the other side of the pumpkin as well and copy the pattern you created, having some bits shorter towards the centre and perhaps going a bit longer towards the outer edges. So at this stage you may decide that you don't want to add anything else into your pumpkin. Now I've got some dried poppy heads and I thought they would look really good as well, really fitting in with the autumn vibe I'm creating, and great to be able to use some dried flowers that I've grown in my own garden. So here I'm doing exactly the same thing as I did with my wheat, just a dab of glue at the base of each of the poppies and working my way from one side to the other, putting a poppy in where I can see a gap. I'm having some stems that are a bit longer and some stems that are a little bit shorter, just to create a bit of visual interest. And there's my finished pumpkin. I just need to pick off the trails of hot glue and it's all finished. My second pumpkin was much smaller, so you can see here that I didn't need to cut off so much of the sleeve of my jumper. And here I'm going to take a needle and thread, tie a couple of knots in the needle and do a running stitch around the cut edge of the jumper, and then I'll use that to gather in and get a really close fit without having to use my hot glue. The one advantage of this is if ever I wanted to go back and use the pumpkin as an orange pumpkin again, I just need to cut the thread and pull the jumper off. What I'm doing here is putting the jumper sleeve back over the pumpkin and fitting it in place. And then I turn the pumpkin over and very gently pull on the needle to draw up the thread, and just remembering that when I measured it, I didn't measure to go right to the centre of the pumpkin. I just measured it enough of the sleeve that it just went over the lip. I wanted to make sure the pumpkin had a flat base so it would sit securely on my surface. I didn't want to put the jumper all the way around the edge just in case the pumpkin rocked around a little bit. And then when you're happy with the fitting, just sew off with a couple of stitches in place and then cut your thread, and this pumpkin is done. Actually, it's not quite done. I'd forgotten that I had also gathered up the neck of the pumpkin round the wrist section of the sleeve, so I did exactly the same thing here, tied a double knot in the end of my thread and then just went round the edge of the pumpkin, doing a running stitch, just keeping it an even distance away from the edge of the cuff so it didn't go up and then down, and went all the way around back to the beginning and then pulled on the thread and secured to finish. The next thing you need to do is to think about whether you want to decorate your pumpkin or leave the jumper bare. So I am going to be using some of this narrow gingham check to tie a bow around the neck of the pumpkin. Again, you might want to play with the bow, pulling tight on the loops, shortening the tails, just so you get both sides of it even and it falls the way you want it to fall. So you might want to have long tails, short tails, it's entirely up to you. And here, because the ribbon is so narrow, I'm not doing the dovetail cut, I'm just cutting from a slant from one corner to the edge just to stop the ribbon fraying. And then with my hot glue gun, I'm going to add on this little boho tassel. This was made using salt dough beads and a tassel made using the thread you can see that I did my sewing with, just wrapped around and round my hand. And then I'm using my scissors just to glue the cord in place so it sits exactly where I want it to. And when I'm happy with the placement, I will cut off the excess bit of cord and then glue in some of my artificial eucalyptus in the same way I did for my first pumpkin. Because this pumpkin was smaller than my first pumpkin, instead of putting whole sprigs of eucalyptus in, I'm putting in individual leaves. And you can see me, I'm cutting here, cutting down the stems quite short in order that everything is in scale. And here you see me putting the finishing touches to the little decorative detail here. I've only gone for 4 leaves this time, a tiny sprig of the fake eucalyptus berries, my very narrow ribbon and my boho beads and tassel. And here are my finished pumpkins side by side with the lovely muted colours of the woolly jumper disguising the brush orange and embracing the current trend for farmhouse and a boho style. A really great way of reusing old jumpers and giving your pumpkins a brand new look. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you again next time.